All right. Just for a quick break, we've got one session and then lunch. So if we all want to grab our seats, the next session is a virtual session. But we talk a lot about the promise of PACE as an economic development tool, not only as filling a gap for property owners, but also for the local communities. And so I'm really pleased today to have two folks from our partnership with the city of Kansas City and the city of St. Louis. For those of you in the room, I have turned the temperature up. So hopefully we will not have icicles on our earlobes anytime soon. But it should be going up. If you're still cold here in the next 20 minutes, let me know. But with us, we have Peter and Andrew from, like I said, the city of St. Louis. SLDC is Peter, who will be up first, and then Andrew with the city of Kansas City Sustainability Office. I'll be sharing with you some of the projects that went on there, how they feel the impact of PACE plays a role in both in economic development and the policy goals of the local communities. Many times communities have environmental sustainability goals that PACE can play a role in. And so I've been pleased to be able to work with both of these gentlemen over the last several years, very closely with Peter as we took over the Set the Pace district. Has been very helpful. So Peter, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and I will let you take it on from here.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So welcome, everyone. I'm Peter Phillips. I'm the Vice President of Land Assemblage and Redevelopment at St. Louis Development Corporation. And I want to thank MEI for having me on and for the summit in general. I've been involved in PACE now for a few years, but something like this summit would have been extremely helpful at the offset for me, when I first got into PACE. So it's not to say I didn't have help. I see a lot of friendly faces on the panels and those in attendance that were instrumental into the creation of the city's programs. So don't want to leave them out. But anyway, I want to give a little background on SLDC and myself real quick to set the stage for the economic development portion of this. So for St. Louis Development Corporation, to try and summarize it, we are an independent economic development organization that we look to empower, develop, and transform the city of St. Louis through a vibrant, just, and growing economy in which all people can thrive. That is kind of our motto here. And the four primary areas that we focus on at SLDC are real estate development, minority and small business empowerment, neighborhood and community transformation, and industry and business development. So the way we go about this is we support the local government boards. For example, the Land Clearance for Redevelopment Authority of the City of St. Louis, the Land Reutilization Authority, which is the city's land bank, Port Authority, Clean Energy Development Board, and others. And our organization provides staff support for all those individual boards. And those boards are the governing authorities for the various incentives and economic development tools that the city offers. And so we provide the staffing support and recommendations to the boards, but they ultimately have the final decisions. So just a quick snapshot of SLDC's accomplishments for 2022. We created over 2,400 new jobs, over $750 million in development costs total, about 1,300 new residential units, and over 400,000 new commercial square feet of redevelopment. So, and the way we do that is through the variety of different programs through those boards that I mentioned. And it can include any of the economic development tools like new markets tax credits, tax increment financing or TIF, tax abatement, revolving loan funds of various sources, issuing of revenue bonds. We have a brownfield program that has a loan program and grants as well. And then, of course, PACE. So basically, again, to kind of summarize what we do and our goal with these tools and programs is that we use these to fill gaps in capital stacks for these redevelopment programs. And the city of St. Louis has a good amount of properties that are in need of redevelopment, a lot of vacancy, a lot of dilapidation, that our goal is to turn these around and create job creation activities and revitalize neighborhoods. So PACE is a great tool in order to use maybe individually, but also in conjunction with a lot of those other programs. So whether they're large or small, each individual project is different and have complex capital stacks, and it can be extremely difficult for redevelopers to get their financing lined up. Specifically, we've noticed that equity in the front end and debt financing can be extremely difficult for those to fill in, and then a lot of times there will be gaps in their pro formas and what they're looking to accomplish and the cost of the project and what they actually have or can acquire. So PACE being a tool to provide a lot of that funding on the front end is extremely valuable in order to fill some of that gap and some of that equity and debt financing. And a lot of times it can be critical in order to line up other financing sources as well, and other programs, including being paired with new markets tax credits and others. And a lot of times some of those other programs will like to see other fundings and financing sources come in first, and lining up PACE can be essential in order to get other financing sources to line up after. So, and also just to step back, I know Josh had mentioned too that our program in the city, Set the Pace St. Louis, is a third-party administered program, and currently with MEI being our administrator, I'm not sure we would have the capacity ourselves in order to manage this program, to ensure that the requirements of the state statute were being met, and to be that facilitator for some of these property owners and developers that are seeking PACE financing. MEI's involvement and support is instrumental in order to get these things lined up. I just don't think we have the capacity. So they're another shout out to them for that. But I would say what's really nice about PACE, and I'm sorry I don't have all this on a slide, but when we get to the slides later on, it'll be just I want to go over a couple projects at the end. But what's nice about PACE financing as an economic development tool is the width that and everything that it can cover and how it can be essential for an individual project. So, for example, like whether it be building envelope or it be mechanical systems inside the building, as long as it's efficient enough and it meets the requirements of the PACE statute, it can be a component of PACE financing. So when you have a capital stack that may have a gap, I'm just going to throw out irrelevant arbitrary numbers. Let's say a project has a gap of $1 million, and maybe they hadn't considered PACE financing previously, but maybe some of the items in the redevelopment of them redeveloping this old building and its envelope, its roof, or its windows, insulation, again, the mechanical systems, any of that they were already doing that could meet the PACE requirements, they could utilize PACE as a financing option for that project and really lower that gap. So that's and a lot of times also too, they're already these projects, some of the larger ones and ones that we'll get into on the slides, you'll see that it requires quite a few different funding sources and financing sources and incentives and all of this to get it down, down the line and get it into completion. And so having a mix of different types of available financing is critical. One of the last things I want to talk about before we get to the example projects is that we do have in the city of St. Louis, we have a sustainability plan, which we are currently in the process of updating, but we have sustainability goals. We have building energy performance standards that each building over 50,000 square feet has to abide by in terms of energy efficiency and utility use. And we have, climate adaptation, plans and goals and objectives. And so PACE fits as an economic development tool, not just financially. So, I mean, it is extremely important for some of these projects to get over the finish line to utilize PACE, but also just more in general, it aligns greatly with the city's sustainability plan and other objectives we have in terms of climate resiliency and sustainability. So And it's just, it's great. We have in the city, sometimes incentives are not met overwhelmingly positively by the community and the residents. And there's, so when you have an option for, and I want to be clear, we don't consider the PACE program or PACE financing an incentive. I just want to be clear about that it is, private dollars going in, and it is a repayment. It's not a tax abatement or a grant or anything like that. So just to be clear, we don't consider it an incentive, but as you move forward with these projects, that may include other incentives like tax abatement or TIF that may not be as popular with the residents, especially in the city. Having a program, an option for financing that aligns with sustainability plans and goals and things that the community is seeking with sustainability can make a huge difference in selling of this project and getting the community involved. And so being able to point to objectives being met sustainability wise is huge, and another a huge benefit for incorporating PACE into projects other than just being able to fill that financial gap and equity on the front end. I will say that PACE doesn't work for every project, but every project is different, and it may work great for some and may not for others, and that's okay. Our major selling point for PACE is that we utilize a lot of different types of economic development tools, and every project is different, and the more tools the better, essentially. And so PACE fits a special niche for the sustainability component, and that is extremely helpful for us in order to get a lot of the projects done that we're looking to get done. But again, it's just as an economic development tool, is an option that we can provide to potential redevelopers that are looking to revitalize old vacant buildings and bring jobs and a better sense of community to areas that maybe haven't seen it in a long time. Just the more options, the better. And I would think that as so far for commercial PACE, it has provided dividends, probably more so than we originally imagined. So with that, I'll go ahead and say we'll move to the first slide and just kind of go over some of the projects that we have. And so you'll see on the left here, we've got a list of some of the larger commercial projects that we've had, and you'll see a variety of different types. You'll see residential units, you'll see hotels, and you'll see some of the schools that you'll see there mentioned were schools that had been redeveloped into residential units. A grocery store, and the Armory, which is the first major one I wanted to touch on in this slide, which is an entertainment complex. And so this building has been vacant for a while. It housed the 138th Infantry Division of the Missouri National Guard in 1938, and later turned into St. Louis Tennis Club. So this one went through a couple of different iterations of what they were looking to redevelop it into, but ultimately they decided on this entertainment complex, food, drink, live music, and a space where there's also different types of entertainment venues and such. It's a little bit over, eventually to house the St. Louis Tennis Hall of Fame, to kind of kick back a little bit of note to its previous St. Louis Tennis Club history. About a $60 million redevelopment that included quite a few different types of incentives. And let's see here. So we've got, I wanted to make sure I didn't misstate. So it looks like with the PACE financing, it looks like it was almost 16 million on that. And it included improvements to the envelope, HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. And you can see here the total estimated cost savings and the energy saved to this project is going to be relatively large, just given the size of the building and the investment put into it. So it's a great project. It's one that opened at the end of last year. It's a really cool building. We provided other incentives, including tax abatement, and I also gave them a brownfield cleanup loan for this project to remove some asbestos and lead from this building, which was fairly contaminated with it. And so I feel like this one is a great example of a historic building that had been vacant for a really long time, kind of an eyesore right off Interstate 64, that we were able to pull together a variety of different sources for financing, loans, PACE, and to get this one redeveloped into a really lively entertainment venue. So if you're ever in St. Louis, I encourage you to kind of check it out and look into it. It's a really neat building. And I would say, again, this one was, PACE was a big part of this one, actually, in order to get it finalized and completed and get all of the other financing lined up. So just a great example. I'm going to move on to the next project. So Jefferson Arms. So now this one is not actually done yet, but this one has been vacant since 2006, built in 1904 to accommodate travelers for the World's Fair. And now this project, we're looking at close to about 145 million for this. It turned into a hotel and residential units. And so now this one, with their almost 30 million in PACE financing, it is a large amount and a large project. But this building it's an important one for the city in order to get redeveloped, and it's required a lot of assistance, whereas other projects, may not. Not just in terms of the gap in the capital stack, but we're having to assist in addition with parking and all of those things. And so this one was a very complicated project, and at least at this point we can say that the financing has been lined up. They have begun work, and we are very hopeful that this one will make it to completion. But again, if you look at just the sheer number of dollars spent and put into this project, the jobs created from it, whether it be construction or full-time after completion, the energy saved once being fully constructed, as compared to just maybe following the standard building codes, will be huge, and a big improvement and a big good notch for our sustainability plan at the city. And so again, like I said, this PACE is instrumental in this property. I really don't think that this project would have gotten there. And again, it's not completed, but I don't even think it would have gotten this far without utilizing PACE financing as an option. So at this point, I will go ahead and yield and just say that, like I said, from our perspective at SLDC, as the economic development arm for the city, the more tools, the better. PACE is a great one to utilize and can very much assist with developers that are looking at old properties that need a little touch up and need a little renovation, in order to fill that gap, to provide some equity and financing on the front end of projects. Extremely helpful. And I hope to see that our program continues to grow in St. Louis, as we see a lot more projects like these. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter, very much. Are there any questions for Peter here in the audience? Yes, we got one.
Thank you, Peter. Steve Method with Midas Developments. I know that you said that you don't consider PACE to be a subsidy, and clearly you've shown the Armory and Jefferson Arms that it mixes with other forms of subsidy. Is there a type of subsidy that it does not work well with?
So in my experience, not so much. We've paired it with historic tax credits as well. I can't speak to that level myself. Unfortunately, I don't work in the incentives department. And so once usually it gets past the Clean Energy Development Board stage of the financing getting approved, a lot of times I am no longer involved in these projects. And my specific role at SLDC is largely related to pre-development activities, whether it be environmental or, demolition, soil, that kind of stuff, including, and then also including PACE and the assistance. So I would probably have to lean on Josh a little bit to see if he's run into any situations where they don't mix. But just anecdotally and my limited experience, I have not seen any yet.
And I can't say that I'm aware of any that it doesn't mix with either. There's right now, I guess technically HUD, right? HUD has not provided consent in Missouri. So until we get an attorney general's opinion that simply reflects that the law is an ad valorem tax, HUD funding can't be utilized with PACE. That's the one I know that is a hard no right now, but they can use it in other states. Texas, as an example, their AG has approved it.
This is actually an expansion on that answer a little bit. I was going to mention HUD too, but Fannie and Freddie also, that's kind of a non-starter with them. Actually, one of the two, and I always mix up which one is which, but one of them says technically yes, but they won't allow you to use PACE financing in lieu of equity dollars. So you have to actually reduce the amount of funding you get from those. And HUD's kind of the same way. HUD won't go over 80%. You have to lower your HUD amount you're taking out and fund that with PACE dollars, which because of HUD funding rates, you wouldn't do very likely. So HUD, Fannie, Freddie are kind of non-starters, but I think that's pretty much it.
We are on a national level also still working with SBA. SBA hasn't given a uniform consent to using PACE. So that would be the other one. There are some examples of it, but they're one-offs. All right. Any other questions? All right. Peter, thank you. And hold off just till the end after Andrew's done, and then we might have some other questions for you.
Yeah.
All right. So
Sounds good.
next up, we have Andrew with the city of Kansas City. Sorry. All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Just wait for my slides as I kick up here. While we're waiting for that, appreciate the opportunity to join you all. I'm sorry, couldn't join you in person with the holiday weekend coming up here. It was getting challenging to kind of get everything I could in this week before that long weekend. So appreciate the opportunity to speak about PACE as an economic tool for Kansas City. I'm going to preface this by saying I am the Chief Environmental Officer for Kansas City, been with the city for about 30 years now, been in this role or this capacity for the past 5 years. And by no means am I an economist or an expert in economic development, but I think Peter kind of queued it up kind of nicely to kind of address that, yes, we as cities have climate goals, and I think I'll probably speak more to that than the economic development and the positive economic development aspects of what PACE provides. But I'm going to hopefully kind of cover a little bit of both. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. All right, so I'm probably preaching to the choir here, and many of you probably know this quite better than I do, but why do we as the city care about economic development? And I think my perspective, being a city employee, I can say that being within the trenches of a city government organization, we go through our budget cycles annually. Our fiscal year starts May 1st here in Kansas City. So usually around October, November, we're already preparing our budget documents for next year. And our budget officer for the city, as well as our finance department, they do an excellent job of forecasting and figuring out just how many dollars are going to be available for us to do our programs, our staffing, for the next fiscal year. So partly why that matters is that, economic development, the well-being of our community is sort of linked to a really strong economic well-being for the whole community. And that translates into, of course, for us in the city, tax dollars in the form of earnings taxes or sales taxes, and other forms of income for the city. And we in the city can turn those dollars into additional programs, staffing, of course, but we're able to bring those things that the community typically comes to the city to help enhance their quality of life, whether it's additional trails, additional programs, things of that nature. So, for us, in terms of my experience with the city, going through the ups and downs of the various economies here, I've clearly seen how important these issues are for cities and for the community as well. I'm a resident of Kansas City. and have been here for about 30 years now as well. So anyhow, the other perk to this is Peter mentioned brownfields as well. We have a pretty robust brownfield program here in Kansas City. And it's interesting to see that, those programs, those projects, sometimes where PACE is used as part of that financing, spurs the growth of or the utilization of those properties that are typically underutilized, particularly brownfields. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Okay, so again, nothing new here. I think Peter covered some of this in his, but what tools are available in terms of economic development, particularly on these projects. Cities, Kansas City, we have options for direct funding. More often than not, it's tax incentives, but also you have, of course, your state and federal funding options, whether they're grants or tax incentives that are available. And there's probably others that you guys are quite aware of that I don't have any clue about, being from the sustainable environmental world that I'm in. But PACE is a kind of one that we are familiar with. We've here in Kansas City been a proponent for the past 10 years because as Peter mentioned earlier as well, it does help us as a city kind of attain other goals that we have related to our climate action goals. So next slide. So here in Kansas City, I'm just taking a little sidebar to kind of tell you a little bit about our world and what our goals are in terms of sustainability and resiliency. In Kansas City, our council approved for Kansas City to be climate neutral by 2040. And what's interesting about this is they approved that particular goal in 2020, literally right in the midst of COVID. It came up, the community kind of came up as this is a big concern from their perspective, and council sort of heard that and really pushed forward for us to have new goals here in Kansas City. So climate neutral by 2040, which is certainly more ambitious than the Paris Climate Accords, which typically sets everything to be 2050 as the goal. So in Kansas City, we're 2040, and our baseline year is 2005. Next slide. So this just gives you a general idea how we measure that. Those of you that aren't necessarily in this space, we do what we call greenhouse gas emissions. So we're able to look at the data that's provided to us by the utilities and by various other sources to kind of show where we started in 2005 in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions, which are around 11.3 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents. But you can kind of see up through 2019, we've had about a 24% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not too bad, but considering that's over about a 15-year period, we have until 2040, we've got another, 15 to 20 years to hit that goal, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. Yeah, we have many different sectors to focus on. And if you can move to the next slide, I kind of show you that how those emissions are broken down. You can kind of see here in this pie chart, between commercial buildings and residential buildings, you're somewhere around 56 to 57% of the total emissions of Kansas City are in the built environment. So that's pretty substantial. So we know that for our purposes, PACE is vital to help us when we're focusing on energy efficiency projects or renewable energy projects. That this is a viable option for projects and building owners that are doing renovations to consider. We here in Kansas City, we do not have, what we have is a benchmarking program. So that is in place now. Benchmarking is literally a reporting requirement for building owners over 50,000 square feet to report to the city on their energy and water usage. The hopes of that kind of a program is that the building owners themselves, when they get their Energy Star score back on their buildings in comparison to other comparable buildings, would see if they get a poor score that, hey, you know, I'm underperforming, maybe there's something more I could do, and therefore they might consider these energy efficiency projects. We do not have a building performance standard here in Kansas City like St. Louis. We do have the most advanced energy code now, which just went into effect this month. But in terms of a building performance standard, I think Kansas City is also going to be moving in that direction. So whether a building owner considers to do these upgrades voluntarily, or whether they do it under a performance standard, again, I think PACE is a viable option to consider. So with that, next slide. This slide just gives you a different perspective of where we started with our greenhouse gas emissions in 2005. You can kind of see how it's steadily come down. Interestingly enough, we did happen to have enough data to put together for 2020, which happened to be when COVID kind of kicked in. You can actually kind of see the little bit of a drop down in our emissions. We're getting ready to do our 2022 inventory. So we will actually see if that holds. All expectations are that it'll probably bounce back up a bit. But what I wanted to really kind of focus on this slide is that just on the right side in the wedge analysis, you can kind of see, you know, our homes and building strategies really is a pretty decent chunk of what we need to address in order for the city as a community to reach climate neutral. You can also see that we also a large focus is on our energy supply as well as transportation sectors, but homes and buildings is a large section. Next slide. Okay, so I'm kind of taking a little different approach to this. Unlike Peter, Josh did provide the full list of the projects that happened in Kansas City, but what I want to do is I just focused on 3 that I thought really kind of highlight certain concerns and issues that we here in Kansas City kind of talk about often enough. And that one of those is, of course, equity comes up often in many different conversations, whether it's environmental, sustainability, development, those kinds of issues. Housing is also another important issue here in Kansas City as well. So I picked out 3 projects that I kind of highlighted some of those issues, as well as that they were really good examples of how PACE really helps provide economic and development potential for the community. So let's start with the first one, Hy-Vee Arena. Hy-Vee Arena, if any of you are familiar with Kansas City, is what used to be known as Kemper Arena, built in the 70s. Really was a very kind of a neat facility for concerts and other things like that. Kansas City built a new auditorium or arena in downtown Kansas City, the T-Mobile Center, which sort of made Kemper Arena obsolete. And the city wasn't sure what it was going to do with that. There were proposals to demolish it. It had a lot of issues, a lot of concerns that just the city just didn't see that it was viable to hang on to for any reason as a city facility. So fortunately, we had some developers come forward with an idea to turn this into a youth sports complex. So, you know, I think about it in terms of myself when I was raising my children, going to all these, you know, if you're signed up for all these tournaments and leagues, you know, you chase your kids around from, you know, all weekend long to these things. Their idea was to turn this into another venue for those types of tournaments, whether it was basketball or other sports. What's cool about this project, there's several cool things about it, of course, and you can kind of see some of the specifics in terms of energy efficiency and some of the upgrades that were made. I think this was like a $64 million project total. But this is in the West Bottoms area of Kansas City. And the West Bottoms area, which were historically the old stockyards, kind of a lot of brick, old style warehouse type buildings, has seen a resurgence over the past few years as people are starting to look for places to live. This particular facility, once it took off and was remodeled, renovated, really gives the local community in that West Bottoms area, which is sort of isolated from the rest of the city, gives them a place to go to work out. There's fitness facilities there. There's a really nice track. And so it kind of becomes an anchor for that particular area, which is starting to spur additional projects in the area. So if you go to the next slide, this project, the Rock Island Bridge, I think really comes about as a direct result of the Hy-Vee Arena, because this is located right adjacent to the arena. And this is taking just an old railroad bridge that connects Missouri and Kansas that was not being used to basically turn this into an entertainment venue. So next summer, this is going to open up, and you're looking at you know, a kind of food options. There'll be like drink options or cocktail options, just a place to go hang out. And then there's going to be a zip line that will cross across the river there. So really just a really cool meeting place, recreational entertainment destination that I think just came about really as Hy-Vee was just kind of revitalized that specific area. All right. This next one kind of brings us Shankman and Mickelson. This is an office retail space project. And I bring this one because this one really focuses on the equity side of things. The Troost Avenue, which is where this is located, is in a historically disinvested part of Kansas City. And there's still lots of sections of Troost Avenue that are still run down and decrepit and really need some help. So this historic building, you know, which had been abandoned for a while, really this project, you know, with PACE financing really can help revitalize it, creates, again, another anchor type facility within a community that is struggling to keep jobs and other amenities in that proximity. So I think this is a great example of just trying to reinvest in disinvested parts of the city. Okay. All right, and this last one here, partly I like just because I like the name of the place, the Flash Cube. I mean, it reminds me of those old flash cubes you find in cameras from the 70s. But this one is located downtown Kansas City. And one of the things with Kansas City, if you're familiar with the city, we've undergone quite a revitalization in the downtown area. 30 years ago, I can attest to the fact that, you know, I'd step out of City Hall, whether it was for lunch, which there was hardly any lunch options to go to downtown, but at 5 o'clock, Kansas City was literally a ghost town. People would bail and that was it. One of the things with the resurgence with the T-Mobile Center coming downtown and the Power and Light District, there was now a very much an interest in people living back downtown. So housing has become an issue. And of course, now there are all kinds of things being built in the downtown area, bringing people back to the downtown core. This project is about 150 apartment units and some office space. It connects our riverfront, our river market area with downtown. So this isn't necessarily, I would say, low-income housing options are not necessarily what this is about. This is probably more on the upper end, but I think it's still a really good project to highlight, just kind of connecting two parts of our downtown area together, but just bringing more housing into the city where, you know, there's a lot of good things going on. We have a grocery store now downtown, which we, you know, used to not have, and you need people to patronize those amenities to keep things going. So, you know, I look at the PACE financing on this was certainly part of the project, certainly a very important part. And I like this project a lot as well. All right. Just to wrap up here then, just in closing, you know, for us on the sustainability side of things, you know, for the building owners, we recognize that, of course, reduced energy costs are important. But from the city's perspective, you know, when we're looking at trying to reach our climate goals, you know, lower greenhouse gas emissions, that will help us reach our goals of being climate neutral by 2040. Can't say enough. You have, of course, stimulated job growth. And that's not just in relationship to the function of the building, you know, whether they're office spaces, retail, or whatever the case may be. It's, of course, we're trying to keep the green economy going in terms of those folks that do the energy efficiency upgrades or the renewable energy projects. It continues the job growth in that sector as well. We talked a little bit about just the more inclusive economic development that PACE provides in disinvested parts of the city, where we're really focusing on equity as a big issue for us here in Kansas City. And overall, just stimulating the economy in general, so that we're offering a good quality of life for the residents of Kansas City. So thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to share our perspective on this.
Great. Thank you, Andy, very much. Are there any questions here in the audience? Yes.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, maybe this is directed to you and our government officials here. Just curious to know how the Infrastructure and Jobs Act or Inflation Reduction Act, those bills that have a lot of kind of energy efficiency or greenhouse emissions reduction initiatives involved with them and funding, how that's going to work with PACE, and if that's going to lead to some new efforts to provide this type of financing or incentives.
So
That's a good question. Andy, you want to start first?
yeah, I'll just address it from what the city's been doing in relationship to that. We are heavily focused on any and all grant opportunities coming down through the IRA or the infrastructure bill, particularly as they align with our climate plan. Most recently, right now, everybody is scrambling to put their applications together for the Solar for All application for renewable energy. So we here in Kansas City, I think we're aligned with what the state application is for the Solar for All, but we've also partnered with an organization that's uniting cities from Cleveland through St. Louis to Kansas City. So we're on at least 2 or 3 different applications for those funds to help bring solar renewable energy to particularly low-income families. But the infrastructure bill did offer some opportunities. It's particularly as it came to the energy code. In Kansas City, we have the 2021 IECC. So the infrastructure bill allowed us to kind of go after dollars associated with job or basic capacity building in the Kansas City metropolitan area. So, job training opportunities, training inspectors, as well as builders on what the new energy code was. So yeah, we're looking at every and all opportunities, and there's still more to come through the IRA on efficiency. But yeah, definitely something cities are keeping an eye on.
Great. Peter, any input?
I would kind of mirror what Andy said aloud. I know that the city is going after any and all opportunities surrounding that. I would mention specifically, like, our approach with some of those federal dollars is more focused on a lot of the workforce development and training components. At least that's what we would probably have more of an involvement in. The city itself, with its the planning department and the building division handles a lot of the sustainability components. So again, we would probably look to utilize some of those funds specifically to develop workforce training programs in the energy efficiency world and try to get workers ready to participate in the projects that, and getting as we get the city ready, for carbon neutrality and such. So and how it relates to PACE itself, there was something I was going to bring up again, just make sure I was specific about it, in that, because again, as we are looking to update our sustainability plan, and the city itself and other entities are going after these funds that have sustainability and efficiency requirements and such, we will be tying our other incentives and economic development tools very likely to some of these sustainability goals. And we do already, but we're looking to enhance it and make it a little bit more specific and add some more teeth about whether or not some of these incentives can be given, or a certain level of incentives can be given if they're not obtaining certain or contributing to sustainability goals. And so in that case, my perception is that PACE will be an extremely important option, in that if we are looking to have requirements or goals or things where they may be mandates, or they may be, in the performance standards, or they may be just goals that we're trying to achieve, where they can, by meeting certain sustainability objectives, they can unlock other types of economic development tools or funding. Having an option to assist with developers and property owners meet those mandates and goals, like specifically, like for PACE, like if we're asking specifically for energy efficiency in redevelopments, it's nice to have a tool that is specific to meet those objectives. It's one of those things where you ask someone to do something and then they have no tools to get it done, or something that they weren't anticipating. It creates a problem and can potentially kill projects. And then you have, properties that still sit there vacant and abandoned. And so the way I see PACE functioning with that is, again, just being an option. As we as cities look to be more resilient and sustainable, and we maybe put mandates or requirements on certain projects and developments, just having an option specifically devoted to sustainability and energy efficiency is extremely helpful.
That's great. And I will say a couple of things. One is, if you're interested in it, tomorrow MEI is hosting the Midwest Energy Policy Series on energy efficiency, and we will have both the Coalition for Green Capital and EPA speaking on the IRA and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. I can tell you additionally, this is the one thing that I like to bring to the table, that literally there's not another administrator in the country that's able to do this. MEI as a policy organization is also working, Matt and I, on tracking and developing resources for Missourians to access both IRA, BIL, and the greenhouse gas reduction funds. I'm aware at a minimum that the greenhouse gas reduction funds, there are 3 pools of funds, one of which Andy mentioned, and we're working with the state and the development of that green bank that'll access the money for the solar funds. That is mostly going to go to residential and maybe some multifamily. But there's 2 other funds, the community investment competition, which focuses on a variety of different, about $7 billion, I believe, that about 5 entities seem to be bidding for, and you can develop certain programs and offerings for that. I know both around the country and here in Missouri, we are looking at providing intent to develop a PACE component of that. PACE can be a component of the Sun Grant as well. And then there's the overall Green Bank $14 billion pot that PACE can be a part of. Additionally, with a lot of the funds for energy efficiency, a lot of those are for residential components, so the homes program and the others. And I don't see PACE playing a large role there. I do see your local utility playing more of a role in that. However, there are incentives for solar manufacturing, advanced battery manufacturing, advanced manufacturing period, workforce development, and each of those components PACE can play a role in. Where they're going to pull some of the federal dollars down, and then they can use PACE as a filler. We were in talks with a couple of folks who are interested in each one of those sectors and talking with those. So to answer your question, there's more questions than answers, but there are a lot of opportunities, and PACE will be playing a role in them. We have to see, the discussion of a loan loss reserve fund, question of buying down interest rates for PACE related projects, funding smaller projects. As you know, a lot of the greenhouse gas is Justice 40 related, which, if you're not familiar with Justice 40, is very similar to the opportunity zones under President Trump. Those really do overlap a lot. So if you're familiar with those communities, if you have projects in those communities, the greenhouse gas funds, no matter where they are, have priority. That's where the money needs to go. So I hope, Ruben, did I answer your question?
PACE requirements, as far as like efficiency is going to be aligned with any of these kind of requirements for these other programs or other initiatives by cities or states or federal government.
So there are other states that are amending their PACE laws. I know Michigan just did it. Wisconsin did it last year. Ohio's looking at it. Missouri's currently not looking at amending its PACE law. Our law is very broad. It just simply states that it's limited to economic benefit, or sorry, energy efficiency and renewable energy, and that the property owner deem an economic benefit. Our biggest hurdle, honestly, is when Andy was talking about the advanced building codes that Kansas City has. And to the earlier question today of for a new build, what's the baseline? If the baseline is a 2021 building code, the difference between what they're going to build and what they're required to build is not as much as, say, in Columbia. No, Columbia is a good one too, but let's say Kirksville, it may have a 2015. That spread does make it easier for property owners to build and use PACE when there's a bigger gap between the baseline and the building code. So, Andy, Peter, any closing thoughts? I think you guys had a great message there for other municipalities. I guess that'd be the one last thing. If there's another municipality that says, well, I'm not St. Louis, I'm not Kansas City, what would you say to them as to the one thing of how PACE can benefit them as a smaller community?
So I'll start. So I would I'd kind of go back to that list of projects that I had on that first slide of the projects, and all of them on there but two received other incentives of some kind. And so I would just reiterate my point back to with economic development, it can be extremely hard. I mean, we have a lot of successes in the city, but we also still have a lot of vacant properties and a lot of areas that still need help. And economic development is extremely hard, and the more tools you have, the better. Like I was saying, I would reiterate that is probably the most important thing. PACE as a tool can be extremely useful. It is not useful in every single situation, but just having more tools is better than having less, in my opinion. So that's as far as PACE goes. I would say that it's an extremely beneficial tool for a lot of projects. And so even if you don't have a lot of the other tools or availability of some of the other programs that we have in, St. Louis or Kansas City, PACE is a good one to start with.
Great. Andy?
Yeah, I would just say from a different perspective from the environmental side, I mean, start small, whether the projects are a little bit more attainable. But the thing I caught just as I joined you guys today was, it seems like awareness. Here I've noticed that sometimes folks here are not as familiar with the PACE program as maybe they should be. Maybe the folks that are directly involved with these projects maybe are so, but as we talk to people that go through our benchmarking program, we offer them some ideas on what they might consider to do energy efficiency programs. We kind of advocate for PACE. Say, well, check these folks out. Go to their website, take a look what that's about. That anything we could do to increase awareness of these in this opportunity will certainly be beneficial.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much. Greatly appreciative of your time here today and the information. So we are at lunch break. For those of you who are here, there is lunch in the hallway. For those of you at home, you'll have to go to your refrigerator and get that. We will be back at 12:30 to start our next session. So again, thank you all. We'll see you in about 30 minutes for the next session.